Hi guys. If I'm looking a little bit ragged, that's because I have been helping clean up from a wedding that we had this weekend for my oldest son, Hayden. And so it's a little late at night, and I'm trying to get this video done for you guys so that we can just kind of keep up with where we're at and we can start off where we need to on Tuesday. So you'll remember that we were looking at this book here, If You Lived in Colonial Times, and you guys gave me a list of things that we might be interested in learning about when we looked at the table of contents. And the only one we really got through was the chapter called Did Children Have to Worry About Table Manners? And we talked a little bit about the fact that if you lived in colonial days, that you couldn't speak at the dinner table and that you might not even be able to sit down. You might have to stand there. So that's something that's a little bit unique. But we're going to go through the chapters that you guys gave me. They're very short chapters. I just kind of want you to listen and try to commit some of these things to memory because tomorrow we are going to possibly use some of this information in a brochure that we're going to create all on our own. So we're done with the table manners chapter. The next one you guys wanted to read was Who Learned More, Girls or Boys? And this is what the book says. After dame school, boys went on to another school to learn more, and girls stayed at home. Most people thought reading and writing were enough for girls to know. They thought it was more important for girls to know how to spin and cook and clean house. When we talk about spin, it's like a spinning wheel so that you can make thread, so that you can sew. But some people said girls are as clever as boys. Why can't they learn too? So they taught their daughters at home. Most boys had to go to school because the law said so. The law said that every town with 50 families must build a school for boys, but some towns did not have enough money to build schools. And the next chapter was 24. So we're going to go to page 24. Let's see here. This says, what happened if you didn't behave in school? And I assure you it's very different than it is now. Almost every schoolmaster in colonial days kept a birch branch handy, and almost every schoolmaster used it to whip schoolboys who did not behave. They used other punishments too. If you didn't know your lessons, you were called a dunce. You had to sit on a dunce stool and wear a dunce cap. Sometimes you had to wear leather eyeglass frames. If you whispered to a friend, you had to wear wooden whispering sticks in your mouth. If you didn't pay attention to the schoolmaster, you had to wear a card around your neck that said, idle boy. If you were caught biting your nails, you had to wear a card that said, bite finger baby. Some punishments hurt your feelings and made you feel foolish. Some punishments just hurt. I bet a birch branch would hurt if you got whipped with it. A very cruel schoolmaster might tell a boy to bring him a small branch from a tree. The schoolmaster cut a slit in one end of the branch. The boy who didn't behave had to wear the branch on his nose for an hour or more. If you went to school in colonial days and didn't behave, ouch. So they have pictures here, and I don't know if you can even see them, but that's what a dunce cap looks like. It's that pointy thing. And you might have to wear a sign or really heavy glasses if you weren't paying attention. So glad we don't do that in school anymore. Let's look here. 27. What happened if you were sick in colonial days? If you were sick in colonial days, your mother would make you as comfortable as she could, just as your mother does now. She would move your bed close to a fire to keep you warm. Then she would think about what kind of medicine to give you. That's about all it says. Except on page 28, you guys wanted to know what kinds of medicines did people use in colonial times. Plants that are called herbs were said to cure almost anything. If you cut yourself, herbs made the cut heal faster. If you bumped yourself, herbs made the swelling go down. There were even herbs to help mend a broken arm or leg. Every family grew their own herbs in their garden and they made their own medicines. Herbs might be good for you, but they tasted bitter. Your mother would mix the herbs in honey to make them taste better. Some people had strange ideas about medicines. A tea made up of ground roasted toads was supposed to be good for you. Governor John Winthrop of Massachusetts Bay Colony wrote down what to do when someone had a high fever. And this is what you're supposed to do. Cut the sick man's fingernails and put the nails into a little bag of fine linen. Put a live eel into a tub of water. Tie the little bag of nails around the eel's neck. The eel will die and the sick man will get better. When a baby gets its first teeth, he often does not feel well. In colonial days, a mother would tie a string of berries around the baby's neck. This was supposed to make the baby feel better. But if the baby still cried, his mother tried another kind of necklace, a necklace made out of the teeth of a wolf. Anybody could sell medicines in colonial days. Sometimes the medicines that were sold were not medicines at all, and some people sold plain water and called it medicine. They put water into fancy bottles and gave it fancy names. Seems a little weird. All right, and then 31. What happened if you went out at night in colonial times? If the town watchman saw you outside after dark, he might say, "What are you doing? Where are you going? Aren't you supposed to be home?" And if you did not have a good reason, the town watchman would scold you and take you home. It was against the law to walk around at night, and it was the town watchman's job to see that everyone obeyed the law. The town watchman never knew what he might have to do next. Sometimes he had to take a lost cow home to its owner, and sometimes he had to be a kind of alarm clock. If someone had to take a trip early in the morning, he would ask the town watchman to wake him up. One town watchman walked the streets for 3 nights with a man who had such a bad toothache he could not sleep. So I don't know if you'd call that a tattletale or what, but the town watchman told you to go to bed, go home, go to bed. We live in Nevada where things are open like 24 hours around the clock, and that doesn't really happen in all the states in our country. All right, you guys, you asked for 34. It says, what happened if you fell asleep in the meeting house? And remember, the meeting house is where church also took place. If a baby fell asleep, no one cared. But if you fell asleep in a meeting house, you would get a rap on the head from the church watchman. So they would hit you right on the head. The watchman was called the tithing man. It was his job to see that everyone paid attention. The tithing man carried a very long pole. On one end was a furry foxtail or a squirrel's tail. On the other end was a wooden knob. The tithing man used the wooden knob on the heads of children who fell asleep or talked or giggled. He used the furry end to tickle the nose of old men and old women who fell asleep. If anyone smiled or whispered in the meeting house, the tithing man wrote down that person's name, and the one who smiled or whispered had to pay a fine. Where did people eat on Sunday? When the long morning church service was over, it was time for lunch. The people who lived far away from the meeting house did not go home for lunch. They went to the Sabbath house nearby. Then back they went to the meeting house for afternoon services. At the end of a long day, the minister told the news of the week. He had good news and he had bad news. He told who was getting married and who had a new baby. He told who had broken the laws and who had been punished. So they talked about all those things during church, and church lasted like the full day, hours and hours and hours. They would stop, they would eat, and they'd go back to church. Okay, that was 35. Only a couple more here. 36. What laws did people have to obey in colonial times? There were laws that said no one should use bad words or get drunk. It was against the law for a baker to bake bad bread, and it was against the law for a brewer to brew bad beer. There were laws that said every man had to work on the town roads a few days each month, but many people did not obey this law. That is why the roads were so bad. In one town, there was even a law that said every man had to shoot 3 crows or 12 blackbirds between the middle of March and the last day of June. What was the reason for this law? Well, the blackbirds and the crows ate the corn and the fruit. There were special laws for poor people. A poor man's clothes could not be as fancy as the clothes of a rich man. The town of Boston had a law about dogs. The law said if a man was too poor to feed the dog, then he could not own one, and a rich man could have only one dog. There were laws for every day of the week, and there were special laws for Sunday. So those are about the laws. Let's see here. And then page 40. What did you guys want to know on page 40? This says, what happened to people who broke the laws? People who broke the laws were punished. Punishments in colonial days were very cruel. Hanging was a punishment for many crimes. If someone stole a silver spoon, he could be put to death. Some people who broke the laws were whipped at the whipping post, and some people were dunked in the water on a dunking stool. In colonial days, it was against the law for a woman to talk back to her husband, and if she did, she had to take the ducking stool punishment. Some people had to sit in the stocks. They had to wear cards around their neck that told what their crimes were. To make the prisoners feel ashamed, the punishments took place out of doors where everyone could see. People who passed by made fun of prisoners. They laughed at them, they threw rotten apples, and they threw mud at them. It is said that the first man to sit in the Boston stocks was the carpenter who built them. What was his crime? He stole money to buy the lumber to make the stocks. Do you guys remember what stocks are? Not like stocks and bonds that have money, but stocks like this, where somebody's hands and head and neck get put into like a wooden frame, and then they have to stand there and people would throw stuff at them. And then this was a ducking board. Not really sure exactly how that worked, but it doesn't look very fun. So if you broke the law, you had a public punishment. And then the last thing we're going to read is page 52. And it says, what games did boys like? Okay. Most of all, boys like to play ball. They played with a leather ball that was filled with feathers. Boys had tops to spin, drums to bang, and pop guns to pop. They had hoops to roll, marbles to shoot, and kites to fly. They had trees to climb and icy ponds to skate on, and their skates were made with wooden runners. Girls played mostly with dolls. Their dolls were made of rags and corn husks. Some girls had wooden dolls. These dolls were not meant to be playthings. They were really fashion dolls. In big towns like Boston, the dolls were put in shop windows. And when a wooden doll got too old to be used in a shop window, it was given away to some lucky girl. Girls sewed samplers with tiny stitches. They made birds and trees and flowers and the letters of the alphabet. Girls made up mottos for their samplers like this one. So a sampler is kind of a different thing. It would be like a piece of material. I don't even know if you can see that. Let's see here. There we are. It's a piece of material, and they would sew things into it. So those are all stitchings, everything you see there. Oddly enough, these still exist from years and years and years ago. And my sister actually has one that hangs in her house. So if you're interested in that, let me know and I'll bring it in. So those are just some of the things about what would happen if you were living in colonial times. Again, I have this book and I have a couple others that you can use for the research that you're going to do when we create a brochure. And that's going to be on Tuesday. And you can also use some of the articles that we used for the New England colonies, the middle colonies, and the southern colonies. And then you'll also be able to use your Chromebook for some research. And we're going to start that project tomorrow. Thanks, guys.